being a Black woman on such a white campus. So that's what I would say. Just wanting to educate myself. So when I was in spaces where I wasn't really sure how to articulate why I was feeling something, I know for sure, why and how I feel the way I do as a Black woman.
Yeah, I would hop off of what Maya said exactly and say that like I wanted to help put some theory to like my walk and my talk, and like feeling like I knew that systemic oppression affected Black people, but I wanted to know where those oppressions came from. And I also felt like, kind of like Maya said, I didn't officially declare my minor until later on, but I found myself taking the classes and was like, I'm 3 classes in, I might as well declare a minor because I don't think I'm going to stop. And thinking that also like a lot of the Black community was also taking ACE minor classes, even if they weren't officially a minor. So it was another place of community. Um, and also, there are not a lot of Black professors at Elon. And I felt that like I knew that I wanted in my experience at Elon to have a Black professor and multiple Black professors. And through the ACE minor, I was able to have that because I think it's important to diversify who you're getting your theory, who you're getting your literature from, and that adds perspective as well. So I thought that it was a good way to help build community, but also kind of like Maya was saying, at that scholarship and theory.
Well, first, I want to thank you, Dr. Longmire Avital and Yukila. I think I'm saying pronouncing your name correctly. It's really an honor to be amongst you all. And I can't see everyone, all the participants, but congratulations to all the Elon students, Odyssey scholars, college fellows. We're all home. We're where we belong, regardless of what anyone else has to say that is different than that. um it's all like, this is one of my favorite parts of being a part of the Elon community. So I'm so grateful that you all constantly engage, alumni and current students in these ways, and that we can still connect via virtually. Really quickly, I have a very interesting story as to how I became an African Studies minor. I came to Elon knowing that I was going to be a strategic, I was going to be either a communications or journalism major. I chose the strategic communications track. And I just became fascinated with some of the offerings in the history department. So I started off taking a class. I don't remember the exact title, but it was a Africa, like an African studies course with the late Dr. Heidi Frontani. She passed away a few years ago. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. But her spirit is still alive and well. And so I took her class. And when I tell you, I was so fascinated by her passion for the continent of Africa. And she specifically had a passion for Kenya, and one other country in Africa that she had traveled to several times. And she told us many tales. She really brought the history, past and present, to life. And she encouraged us to not only be students of news in the United States, but to also be students of news internationally. And that was one aspect of her class that she incorporated that I loved. She would incorporate maps. And she would have us to, look at some of the news, whether it's on BBC, those types of platforms, and to like become more aware of not only what's happening here, but what's happening abroad. And then I took a class with Dr. Amy Johnson. I took Caribbean history. And even in high school, I was pretty much a straight A student, or A's and B's in history. Now, taking history at Elon was much more of a challenge because I guess, the rigor of the classes. But when Dr. Johnson's class, it just blew my mind. And I think Dr. Frontani could see my passion. And so she really pushed me to be better than my best. And she said, hey, Yasmine, I think you would really be good as an African and African-American studies minor. And I'm like, okay. And then she pushed me to become a college fellow. So many, many blessings came out of being an African and African-American studies minor. So.
Thank you all for sharing. And you all have alluded to actually my next question. So, as you all reflect over your Elon experience, what was it like navigating Elon as a Black student, as a Black woman, as a Black man, when you think about all of your different experiences?
I'm gonna just go ahead and say tough. I think that Elon it's a wonderful school. I honestly wouldn't trade my Elon experience for anything. I always say that when I think of my Elon experience, it was kind of like when you are asleep and at like 9 years old and someone whispers college into your ear and you dream about it. That's what Elon was like. It's like all of the, the great college experiences. But they were definitely shaded as well from, racism within the students, systematic racism, institutional racism at the university. And the minor really helped bring like scope to that, and raise my consciousness of that. And I think the strong thing about the minor is that it's interdisciplinary. And so it's great to be able to apply it to my different areas of study, but also apply it to helping me navigate when I'm in the class and kind of like Maya was saying earlier, why am I feeling talked over, or why am I feeling this feeling inside of myself, or starting to pick up on different nuances, microaggressions, microinvalidations. And the ACE minor really helped me put a lot of that into perspective. I remember my freshman year, the first ACE minor class I took was Black Man in America. And that class for me completely opened my mind, and really helped me think about things that I had internalized as a Black man, and as a queer Black man, and brought them into perspective of how I was feeling as a student. And the minor also helped me realize, the Black race is not monolithic, something that was repeated over and over in the minor classes and was very apparent through the professors as well as through the students. And so for me as a student, navigating, feeling invalidated from other students, overt acts of racism from people who live in the town of Burlington, or from other students was difficult. I won't, shade that or slight that at all. But the minor helped me put into perspective why those things were happening, instead of making me feel like hopeless about them, really kind of contextualize, oh, this is why those people say those things and feel that way. It's not me. Inevitably, it's them, and it's how they're socialized, and we're all socialized in America.
I would echo a lot of what Trey said. I think, when you come to Elon, you kind of have this very fresh-eyed, hazy kind of glow. And it feels almost like utopian. I don't know if I'm alone in feeling that way, but it is like, oh, the grass is always perfect. Oh, this chair is always in the right, like they're just things that make it look so picturesque. But I think once you have, a pocketful of those microaggressions, you kind of get chipped away. And then for me, it was like around my sophomore year, I was like, okay, pause. And I come from a very, diverse place. I'm from the DC area. So coming to Elon in general, culture shock, like by far. And I was surprised to learn, and Trey can attest to this, a lot of the white people we're engaging with were saying this was the most diverse place they'd ever been. They never interacted with so many people of color. They haven't ever seen anyone of a different faith than them. And for me, I was like, where the heck am I? I was just shook basically. And it took a lot of readjustment. Even the slang I was using from the DMV, people were like, what are you saying? Can you communicate better? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in a different place. But yeah, I think ultimately, like Trey, I wouldn't change my experience for anything, but I can even remember back to the 2016 election when things were really hot on campus. People were being bold, people were saying things, trucks were driving through campus like they still are recently, and that was challenging. But I always felt like the Creed was my home, and I felt like the ACE minor community was my home, my best professors, my most engaging classes, finals I looked forward to, which, is kind of funny to say as like a college student because you dread most of your academic finals, but it's like just the most enriching classes. And for that reason, I'm very thankful for it.
um, I want to echo also some of the things that Trey and Maya have shared in terms of what their experience was like as an African American or someone who identifies as Black on the campus of Elon. I also had some of those similar experiences. It was a culture shock. I just got off another call talking with some Odyssey scholars, and it took me, honestly, it took about 2 years for me to really kind of feel planted and like settled and saying, okay, I can do this. I really do belong here. Because honestly, I was ready to transfer. Like my first advisor, Dr. Ferrier, Michelle Ferrier, she ended up leaving. She went on to another professorial position at another college. But I remember coming to her office and just like crying and just sobbing. And I can't remember what the situation was, what the context was, but I just felt so stressed. And honestly, one thing that I hadn't really shared or been vocal about was when I was at Elon, I was nominated for Black Girls Rock, and I did end up going on the show. But during that time, there was someone who was trying to like get me expelled from the university. So basically, I had written this article, and I mean, it's only hearsay. Take what I say with a grain of salt, but I'm just sharing it with you. I attempted to write an article about like some of the things that were happening in Burlington in regards to some of the poor Black folks there. I can't remember if it was like predatory lending. It was like a very heavy topic, right? And so, one of the editors or whoever it was, like, was trying to claim that I had committed plagiarism, but the article had not been published. And that's what the editors are for, to correct things or catch things or to decide what gets published and what does not. So that person like really took it to the umpteenth level. And I was like, oh my goodness, this person is really trying to like destroy my entire, like, to trying to get rid of. I was so like, after that experience, I was like, okay, wow. And then I had a history course. It was a little awkward, and we watched the film, the original Birth of a Nation film, and I thought I knocked that class out the park, y'all. I got my grades back. Ultimately, I got a C. I was like, I don't know if I really earned a C in that class, but just kind of very a lot of racist like undertones in a lot of different situations. And unfortunately, I also was, for lack of a better term, the victim of, a group. I don't know if they were students or not. I was coming out of Newman Lumen. I was coming out of Newman Lumen out of, it might have been like a religious ceremony or some type of a student gathering. I walked out, it was late at night, and I lived far off campus at that point. I think I was a junior or senior. And these guys, white guys rolled by me and was calling me the N-word and, made a sexual, slur and all this kind of things. So, I've had my share of those types of experiences at Elon, but it also, I think that it prepared me in some ways, not that I'm excusing any behavior, but it did prepare me for a lot of the things that I've come in contact with now in life. It has helped me to grow a thick skin and to be confident in who I am and my lineage. And so now I find myself as sort of an educator, and a lot of the things that I was taught in Caribbean history and African history and US history, those things I'm recalling. And so when I'm trying to educate people and urge them to vote, I remind folks and I tell people, a lot of people don't know these things. Of course, Blacks were not allowed to vote in this country for many, many years. The same thing with women. And Blacks, there were things that would be done with us, like we would be given poll taxes that we could not afford. We would be given reading tests, things like that, right? Like barriers that look very familiar to some of the barriers we see today. So, and then the last thing I'll say is I learned the IRB process. that was education in and of itself. If I had not gone to Elon, if Dr. Hadi Frontani had not, and Dr. Johnson had not really pushed me to become an Elon fellow. And by the way, there are not very many, I don't know what it looks like now. I was the only African-American female Elon fellow. And I was like, whoa. And the retention rate for Black folks in some of those programs is fairly low, especially in history. And I didn't want to do it. Like, I just felt so uncomfortable. I felt like an outsider. And when I brought my project to my fellow peers, like, they kind of laughed. And I was like, you know, it felt like it was a weird outer body experience. So yeah, I've had my share of interesting experiences at Elon, but all things work together. I'll just say that.
Yes, again, thank you all for sharing, especially on a topic that can be a little heavy at times, especially with all that is going on right now during this time of year. So with that, I'll just go into our next question. These are pretty much two, but just kind of going off of what you all have been talking about. I guess you could say this is like a two-part question. So what are you all's your biggest takeaway from either navigating Elon or from just the ACE minor in general? And then how has that takeaway helped you post Elon?
Something that I've learned from the minor especially is criticize everything and critique and question everything. And something that I've started to think about more that has come from my studies in the minors, you know, we often talk about who is not at the table or who is at the table or not at the table. And we don't often think about who built the table and why is it a table? Why isn't it a chair? Why isn't it a hat? You know, why isn't it a drum? Why is it a table? And why aren't we at this table that somebody else built? And so I think from the ACE minor, I've learned to look at things, okay, who built this table and why is it there? And why am I not at it? Or why am I at it? And why aren't other people at it? And so that's something that I've taken into my professional life, working in the arts, which is a place that is on the outside inclusive, but once you get into the weeds, it has, you know, institutional racism and issues there as well. I've taken it into my academics in graduate school, is this idea of critique and of constant questioning, using theories to cancel out other theories. You know, and I think that's helped me professionally, but it's also helped me academically and just adding nuance to my learning and my continual learning. And that's something that I think the ACE minor really helped me with, is this idea that we're not done learning. You know, we've been here for 400 years and another 400 years, we still have not uncovered all of the histories that Black Americans have encountered in our time in the United States. But yeah, criticize everything, question everything, and don't stop.
Should I go or you want to go, Yasmine?
You can go ahead and go, Maya. I'm still thinking.
Okay. I'm trying to formulate these thoughts. As Trey was speaking, I was like, what am I going to say? I think one really important lesson I took away from ACE minors, like, as much as you need to learn about your history and what you've been told growing up, there's a lot that can also be unlearned, and that you kind of have to admit and look at yourself and recognize, you know, your own holes, your own biases, your own, you know, where your education took a left when it really should have taken a right. And I think sometimes, you know, we're really prideful about our upbringing, our families, what we hear at the Thanksgiving table, you know, things that kind of just get imprinted on your brain. But like Trey was saying, question everything. And that really goes, no matter what relationship it is, you should feel empowered. And I think the ACE minor really gave us kind of the context and tools to question everything, but also, you know, unlearn some of the things that you're told and are proven to be wrong. And that can even be about like self-image and how you've seen yourself, especially as a Black woman. You know, that's constantly evolving for a lot of us. A lot of us are kind of on a spectrum of our Black identity, and we're not always going at the same rate. So one example I can think of is like, I have a very close friend who is half Black. And, you know, we talk about hair all the time, curly hair, love conversations all about hair. But she was coming to me and she was saying, you know, I don't like when my hair dries and it's huge. I always wear my hair wet. And once it dries, I put in a bun. And I was trying to explain to her like the Eurocentric patterns that we have in our culture and like what slaves had to do to hide their hair when they were on the plantations and kind of this evolution of hair, which included, you know, all the way to the Black Panthers, you know, defying the perms happening in like the 60s and 70s and such. And so that's like an instance where I felt like my education, I came with the receipts. I was like, first of all, you're beautiful. But second of all, it's like, look at all of this history and context. Like we are in a moment where you can do anything with your hair. But like she really felt pressured at Elon to kind of conform and try to be in the small box, as small of a box as possible, really. And I've used a lot of, I would say, you know, kind of quick history lessons in my job as a journalist and being able to pull from stories that I can relate to movies we watched in class or discussions or, you know, trips we had. Trey and I did a class where it's like a civil rights tour of the South with our leadership fellow. And that was really, really impactful too, to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and everything like that. So it's great to pull on all these experiences where you can like connect the line. And I think that's only possible, you know, with the AASE minor.
That's a very deep question, but I'll just say, I think two of my biggest takeaways. One is I was exposed to a lot of the various methods of history research or historical research. So, you know, anthropology and oral traditions, like there's so many different methods of research. And that really just, it was just great to learn and to open my mind. I will say, I think that, and I'm still, I think even to this very day, I'm still processing, you know, everything I've learned and seen and heard, particularly at Elon, and how it also helped me with my divinity degree. And even now, in you know, kind of moving in the advocacy space. I in taking a lot of history classes regarding European history, African and African American history, you know, you including U.S. history in that, Caribbean history. I think I've learned why certain things are the way they are, or why, like there's still some residue within the African American, the African diaspora of those of us who were born here, you know, and who are descendants of African slaves. There are certain things that still resonate with us. Rhythm, music. We're a very communal people and we're a very spiritual people, but we're in a context that is heavily about capitalism and competition. So what happens when you put people who are traditionally and historically in our veins and in our blood, communal and spiritual, right? Like there's a lot of conflict there. So this is something I'm still kind of trying to figure out what it all means, and then like what my role is, you know, in all of that. So I don't really know if that may or may not answer the question, but it's more of a like a heightened awareness and sort of like a spiritual revelation. And it helps me to be grounded, and it helps me to understand my values and to, you know, kind of figure out, okay, well, you know, I recognize the context I'm in and that I'm living in and that I have to navigate. But these are the things in my toolbox that I have, you know, from history that I'm very well aware of that I can use in different ways.
Could I add just one more thing that you reminded me? This was another, I think, decision-making factor for why I wanted to opt into the minor too. I was really frustrated with having a day focused on African American history or a chapter focused on the continent of Africa. And I was like, if I'm going to be paying tens of thousands of dollars for this education for 4 years, like I want to go all in. I'm done with these day lectures that are supposed to encompass everything. I want teachers who, resemble me. I want teachers who don't resemble me. I want it all. And I didn't feel like I was getting the satisfaction of that with, my first year at Elon, where all my professors were white. So that's the other thing. And it's really unfortunate that you have to kind of opt in to learn about your history when, European and American white history is the norm and taught everywhere else. But with that decision and, knowing my price tag, I was like, I'm going to opt into this for myself.
Yes, thank you all. So we'll go into our final question, like, I guess, official question. So again, just taking all of your answers, reflecting over your experience at Elon, what is some advice that you have for current students? This also asking for a friend, myself. So what are you all, what is something you all could give us, like a word of wisdom, some more advice, anything for us?
So I'm going to switch it up now. I'm going to go first.
Go ahead.
Two things. One, I highly recommend. First of all, I suggest that you have really take the time to seek multiple mentors. And if you can get, whether or not you end up becoming an AASE minor or a history minor or a history college fellow, don't be afraid to seek out, just kind of like linger over into the history department. You'd be surprised who you meet. They're very friendly people. They've got a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things and a lot of things in history. They're very passionate about their subject matters and have been teaching them for many years for the most part. Get you a mentor in the history department. And then two, if you have the opportunity, because many of us may or may not have the opportunity to travel to various continents throughout our lifetime. Some of us will, some maybe not as much. If you have the opportunity to travel to an African country while you're at Elon, do it. And the great thing is Elon has a lot of, I went to Ghana for J term, I think it was 2013 with Professor Jason Kingsley Aryeh. I was taking his traditional West African dance course. I took it twice as where you have your electives, you could take some electives. It was an amazing transformative experience, especially as someone who identifies as Black or African American or brown. You go there and you see on the billboards and everything and all around you, nothing but Black people. And you talking about a full-fledged economy, it will change your life. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's Yasmine, you bring up a good point. So one of the common ties between me, you, and Maya is we all studied abroad and we all went to Ghana and we all took West African.
You got to.
In the water. But I would hop exactly off of what Yasmine said, and to take advantage of everything. Not only all of the classes in the minor, I mean, it's a requirement still that you have to take a class, in African studies and also, in African American studies, but like expand it out to Caribbean studies, expand it, like really broaden your scope of the diaspora. Again, experience in academia, but also like the professors in AASE are just quality, like high quality and so distinguished. I mean, when I'm gonna just get real for a second. White people have the ability to be mediocre. I always say, white privilege is the ability to be mediocre in any space. Where Black people are typically not afforded that opportunity. And because Black people are not afforded the opportunity to be mediocre, also in academia, our Black professors at Elon are far high and above the echelon of what they need to be a professor at Elon. They're authors, they're podcasters, researchers. They have so much knowledge. And a lot of the professors at Elon that I've taken knowledge away from, I never even took a class from. It was sending an email, sitting in their office and chatting about something possibly connected to the AAASE minor, possibly connected to another class. I remember one day I was just watching CNN and I saw Professor Naima Clark just on CNN talking with one of the hosts. And I was like, that's Elon up there. Like the scope that they have in intellect and in academia is so wide. And if you do not take advantage of them while they are there and sit down with them and really talk through your theory, your careers, your goal, how you're applying all of those things in a very interdisciplinary manner, then you are not getting your money's worth. When Maya talks about those tens of thousands of dollars, these minds are hundreds of thousands of dollars in their worth. And truly like just pick at them and pick at them and pick at them because they know so much and can really help contextualize your entire Elon experience.
Everything that was just said times 1,000. I completely agree. I think another thing that we may have touched on but didn't talk too much about is like a lot of these classes, you are the only brown body in there. You might be one of two. If you're lucky, you're one of three. And you guys will make eye contact when weird things happen. And that's kind of like, you know, the nod passing people up on campus when you don't know them, but you can recognize. AASE classes, you will pass that threshold. And there's something about that community and feeling a sense of unity and feeling like you can trust the people that you're around more than just surface level. And the professors, you know, look like your aunties, and they really do kind of come together and culminate as this familiar, I can't say that word right now, but you guys know what I'm trying to say, family unit. Anyway, so yeah, I would say having classes full of diverse faces and diverse backgrounds, even if they look like you, as someone was mentioning, the diaspora is huge. And that's another thing I think that really jumped out at me during my coursework with AASE. I was not super keen or aware on, you know, some of our internal divides as a Black community. But there really is a lot of distinction depending on what your lineage is from. And if your parents came from directly from the continent or kind of were dispersed around, or you're a mixed background. So giving that context also kind of enhances yourself when coming into other spaces of Blackness, because you will have more of a holistic understanding of the people around you.
Thank you. So yeah, that concludes our official panel and questions. Thank you all for answering and being transparent and just being open. So for the next 10 minutes or so, we'll flip it. So if you all have any questions for me as a current student, we can spend like a few minutes answering those, and we'll see where we are on time with there. So.
What do you think has been your most challenging part about being an Elon student so far, with relation to your identity?
I think just like, it's just all ironic, if you will, like with Dr. LA reading out my bio. I'm very like pro Black women. Like I'm for the Black community as a whole, but the research that I do, the major, the minor, literally there's like this, I remember taking my intro to psych class like at one point, and they were like, a lot of people go to psychology to figure out what's wrong with them. Like they turn to the field of psychology to like work within themselves. Like, is that common joke? And then I was looking like, wow, I'm a psych major, big on mental health, a women's gender sexualities major, woman, and then I'm an AASE minor as well. So I'm like, maybe I am just doing this to figure out myself. But also like, I was raised by Black women. This is just the community that's very dear to me. And I say that because of the research with the strong Black women. I've seen it all my life. And even in my Lumen application, I talked about like, literally like I knew about the strong Black women before I even knew what the strong Black woman was. And so the most difficult thing thus far is like how do I continue to push forward in this research and like tell Black women like, hey, you should take care of yourself if I'm not taking care of myself. And I'm a junior now, so like I finally gotten to the point where it's like, if my Monday is busy, I don't care if I don't have anything to do on Tuesday, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm not going to coffee, like I'm not doing, like, it's just, the answer is no. And it's taken me 3 years to get to that point. And that's been like the common difficulty, because it's like, how do I wrestle with preaching to the masses of like, please take care of yourself. And then I'm also still subscribing to this strong Black woman phenomena. And again, it's just now really clicking with me. And I remember my first year when I met Dr. LA, you know, she told me, she was like, you have this sparkle, and Elon will take that sparkle if you let them take it, like protect it. And I was like, yeah, like I'm gonna do that. Like, I'm not gonna, yeah, sophomore year, I was all over the place. And literally, Dr. LA doesn't even know this. Like a week ago, I was just reflecting with a peer, and I was like, wow, like, this is what I've been wrestling with. This is the work that I'm working with that is still affecting me. So like to answer that question, just realizing how much I'm like stepping on my own neck in my research, and making sure that I'm practicing what I preach as I continue to go through Elon, and again, gain this knowledge. But even beyond Elon, like how can I, again, not take that strong Black woman persona, because that is something I feel is very concrete in Black women's identities, but also continuing to care for myself as I'm sitting here trying to make a research paper, an app about caring for yourself. I don't want to be a fraud, you know?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And like you mentioned, like the pressure at Elon for everyone to do well is so high. And that is a blind, stereotype. They do not take into account, where we're coming in at, what our mental state is like, how we put on the facade to make it seem like we're all okay 100% of the time, and we're not. So
absolutely. And even to Trey's point, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
To your point about mediocrity, Black people don't get that. We aren't afforded that privilege to do something. And so again, going back to Dr. LA and I's discussion my first year, it was just like, oh, like I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do this, not realizing like how much energy this was actually costing me. And now seeing that, like, again, in my work, maybe my work was my saving grace, because I'm like, okay, like I need to calm down. So that's really been like the biggest balance for me. It's just trying to figure all of this out.
No, you're right on it. Like the research will read you for yourself. Like I remember reading articles and going back to Dr. LA's office for our hours and being like, wow, they're talking about double consciousness, quadruple consciousness, and I'm feeling all of it. And and you're right. Like I think at Elon, and I know I definitely, was impacted by this, is the need to like do everything and be perfect at everything. And
exactly.
I know for me, like being like an openly queer Black man, where there were like maybe 2 others on the entire campus, I felt like there was this like hyper microscope on me. It's like seeing like this, exotic creature. What is he gonna do? Is he gonna be able to do this? Is he gonna be able to do that and do it well? We've never seen one of those before. And so there is this kind of idea of like, I feel like I must represent, and therefore I must be excellent, because I would not want to diminish, those who come before me. And that, again, like Maya said, is like a facade of like, we should be entitled to be mediocre. Not saying we should all be out here getting C's, but like, if you do get a C, plenty of white people get C's too, and that's okay. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, exactly what you were saying, like there's this pressure of feeling like you have to live up to the bar when nobody else is setting that bar but yourself. And so, yeah, it's really difficult. I know there was a question in the chat.
Yes, there's a question here for Yakila, who's currently at Elon, but I think it's kind of was brought up by Yasmine, and it's a question around safety. And do you feel, or did you feel safe at Elon? So I think that'll probably, it's probably the last question we can tackle, and maybe one of the most important ones as we end this.
I can go first. I just had a conversation with Dr. Book actually about safety. So I can't see our audience, but Elon just recently had a Trump convoy, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was like 200 plus cars. I think it lasted for like 30 minutes. They went up and down Haggard and then came back a few hours later. So no, in this present state, but also as a Black woman, there's very few instances where I feel fully safe. And that's, again, I'm not going to say it's not Elon's fault, but also, again, considering my identities, there's very few spaces where I'm like, all right, this is a safe space for me. Even as I was looking for, just being fully transparent, looking for a space to hold the panel. I know Dr. Ellie was saying I could go into our like little study room, her office complex. And I was like, I try not to be on campus after nighttime by myself. And so, yes, just to answer that, currently in the state that we're in, especially with election year coming up, my first election that I can actually vote in, I do not feel safe.
Thank you for answering that. And I echo a lot of what you said as well. I feel like safety too is like we have to look at it in different levels, like intellectually, mentally, physically. And in all of those, from one point or another, like I know I, haven't felt safe on campus, whether it was, again, like mentally or intellectually in class, feeling, discounted by professors or from other students. Or I'll never forget one day I was at a party, I was leaving a party, and, there were not Trump signs at this point, because it was, a little pre-him, but, Confederate flags and whatnot going up and down Haggard or right outside the tap house. And I reported it to the Elon police, and they asked me if they were threatening me. And I had to turn back and be like, well, yes, like their symbol, their existence right now, what they're doing is intimidating and threatening me. Like unless they hit you or said anything to you, we can't do anything about it. And so I think that safety ebbs and flows, and also there's so many different layers to it. At Elon, but they're also, speaking to, my privilege as a man. There are certain arenas that I'm in as a Black man that garner me a lot more privilege than Black women do, or non-binary Black people do. And so I think that Elon needs to, do a better job of making all Black people feel safe, on the spectrum of what privileges we do and don't have.
I think I totally agree with everything that was said. I will say I felt safer on Elon's campus than outside in the town of Elon or Burlington, getting my groceries or, trying to get some food or whatever. But I never went home without calling either my boyfriend, my mom, my dad, or my sister. And it was just because I just had one too many instances of cars revving up behind me or someone shouting at me. And I lived over the railroad tracks my senior year. And that stretch was always, I would get anxiety. I would have one hand in my pocket, talk on the phone, and constantly be scanning. And thankfully, I mean, nothing more than a few of those revs and shouts happened to me, but it's those horror stories and those it could happen, what ifs that kind of bubble up and can kind of like clout your humanity and also, the fear of just being a Black woman.
Yes, and so I think we're good to close. I do have one quick update. So like Dr. Book, she's been working on, her and her administration have been working on things like that actually. She stopped by the creek today. So we just talked about with the election coming up, they were trying to work on shutting Haggard for November 4th, working on safe spaces for students, November, probably that whole week, honestly, but for the alum, there has been things that have been worked on since you all have left. So that's been excited about that. So they're being more proactive. They're definitely listening to us as students, especially with all that has been heightened this summer and election year. So hopefully that's a great update for both my panelists alum, but also the attendees.
Keep
Cool.
pushing. Keep pushing.
This has been amazing. I'm glad I'm wearing glasses. Sometimes I've been wiping tears from my eyes because I love you all. This is just a joy. I think for many of us, particularly faculty of color, faculty who do scholarship on the experience of persons of color, when we are at predominantly white universities, we're making a conscious choice to be here, and our choice is because of all of you, and the joy that we get from seeing you in our classes, and we walk with you for 4 years, but we don't always get to catch up and see what happens. So I'm just getting super emotional because you all are just continuing to be bright lights. Yakila, I see the brightness that's going to continue from you. And I'm just so incredibly honored and proud to have been a part of your journey. I think I'm saying that on behalf of so many of the faculty that you have had the opportunity to engage with, that I should say that we've had the opportunity to engage with you. So, Elon, there are lots of feelings about Elon, but Elon finds these amazing students. So whatever Elon is doing, I'm glad that Elon is doing it, because I just cannot imagine my teaching career without encountering you guys, and how you all have given me just so much grace and energy to keep pushing. But always with a reminder that you have to take care of yourself, and you have to learn when to say no. I'm glad you did not say no to this. Thank you all to those of you who attended. We did record this, so hopefully we'll be able to figure out a way, if I can figure out technology enough to find out where this recording goes. I will get it out there. But I am just incredibly humbled and proud by the energy that graced us today. And I cannot wait to keep this up. I think this is just the beginning. I think we got to do this like every year. Sometimes the silver lining out of everything being virtual is you recognize this opportunity that we have, and this has just been amazing. So we're gonna you all can't get rid of me. I pop up when you least expect it, so we will continue.
Love you. We would never want to get rid of you.
No, even if you were the only person who called, I'd show up. If I have to shut the rest of Elon out, I'll keep my doors open for you.
Oh, see. Things that make my tears water come down even further. All right, everyone, thank you all so much for attending. This has been wonderful, and we'll see you next year, I'm sure, when we do this again. Good night, everyone. Thank you all. Thank you all, panel.
Good night.
Good night.